I froze as the closet door slowly creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but darkness within. The heavy rain outside drowned out all other sounds, except for the soft, rhythmic breathing that seemed to emanate from that impossible void. When lightning flashed, I could have sworn I saw a pair of eyes blinking back at me from inside. My name is Sarah, and I've always considered myself a logical person. I'm a meteorologist by profession, which means I understand the science behind storms and weather patterns. There's always a rational explanation for unusual phenomena. Air pressure changes, causing doors to open, wind creating strange sounds that mimic human voices, shadows playing tricks on tired eyes. At least, that's what I used to believe before. Last April, I live alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the 5th floor of an older building in Seattle. The place has its charm. Crown molding, hardwood floors, large windows that offer a view of the city skyline. During the day, it feels cozy and welcoming. But when the spring storms roll in, bringing their relentless downpours and moody darkness, my apartment transforms into something else entirely. The trouble began during an unusually heavy rainstorm in early April. Seattle is known for its rain, of course, but this was different. Aggressive, almost angry, as if the sky itself harbored some grudge against the earth below. I was working late, analyzing weather data for an upcoming forecast, when the power flickered and went out. Not particularly unusual during a storm of that magnitude, but inconvenient nonetheless. I navigated through my apartment by the glow of my phone's flashlight, searching for candles I kept for just such occasions. As I passed the spare bedroom, a room I primarily used for storage and rarely entered, I heard a soft thump from inside. I paused, listening intently. Nothing, just the rain hammering against the windows and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Must be something falling off a shelf, I muttered to myself, though I couldn't shake the uneasiness that crept up my spine. I continued toward the kitchen, but stopped when I heard it again, a distinct thump, followed by what sounded like something being dragged across the floor. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart beginning to race. I lived alone. There shouldn't be any movement in that room. I considered my options: investigate the sound, or ignore it and continue my search for candles. Against my better judgment, I turned back toward the spare room. The door was closed, though I typically left it open. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open slowly and shined my phone light inside. The room appeared normal. Cardboard boxes stacked against one wall, an old desk in the corner, a closet with its door slightly ajar. I scanned the floor, looking for anything that might have fallen, but found nothing out of place. Just as I was about to leave, satisfied that my imagination had gotten the better of me, the closet door swung open further with a long, drawn-out creak. My light caught something moving in the darkness beyond. A subtle shift of shadows that didn't align with the natural movement of my flashlight beam. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting the tremble in my voice. "Is someone there?" No response, just the steady drumming of rain against the window pane. I stepped closer to the closet, my curiosity momentarily overriding my fear. The closer I got, the colder the air became, as if the temperature dropped several degrees with each step I took. By the time I reached the closet door, I could see my breath fogging in front of me. I pulled the door open wide and aimed my light inside. Empty hangers swayed gently, though there was no draft I could feel. The back wall of the closet looked wrong somehow, darker than it should be, almost as if the light from my phone couldn't quite reach it. I leaned in closer, squinting into that unnatural darkness. A face materialized from the shadows, not fully formed, but an impression of eyes. A mouth stretched open in a silent scream. I stumbled backward with a startled cry, my phone slipping from my hand and clattering to the floor. The light spun crazily across the walls before settling, illuminating nothing but an ordinary closet interior. I retrieved my phone with trembling hands and backed out of the room, pulling the door firmly shut behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to rationalize what I'd seen: sleep deprivation, stress, shadows playing tricks in the inadequate light, all logical explanations. Yet none of them quite accounted for the bone-deep chill that had settled over me, or the certainty that something had been watching me from the darkness. The power returned about an hour later, and by morning, the storm had passed. In the bright light of day, my experience seemed ridiculous. I even checked the spare room closet again, finding nothing but old winter coats and storage boxes. I laughed at myself, chalking the incident up to an overactive imagination fueled by darkness and the eerie ambiance of the storm. For the next few days, everything was normal. I went to work, came home, prepared for an upcoming weather system that was predicted to bring more heavy rain to the area. I almost forgot about the strange experience. Almost. Then the rains returned, more intense than before. The forecast called for the worst April storms in decades. As I sat in my living room that evening, watching the rain lash against my windows, I heard it again. A thump from the spare bedroom, followed by the unmistakable sound of the closet door creaking open. Told myself to ignore it, that investigating would only feed into my irrational fears. But when I heard what sounded like soft footsteps padding down the hallway toward me, I couldn't help but look up. The hallway was empty, but a trail of wet footprints led from the direction of the spare room to just outside my living room. Small, like a child's, but oddly shaped, too narrow, and with toes that seemed elongated. I stared at the footprints, trying to process what I was seeing. As I watched, another appeared, then another, forming a path that led right toward where I sat. Yet there was no one there making them, just invisible feet, leaving behind wet impressions on my hardwood floor. I leapt up from my seat, backing away from the advancing footprints. They stopped when I moved, as if whatever was making them was startled by my sudden movement. After a moment's pause, they changed direction, heading back down the hallway toward the spare room. I followed at a distance, watching as they disappeared into the room. By the time I reached the doorway, the footprints had vanished entirely, leaving the floor dry as if they had never been there at all. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay awake, listening to the storm and the occasional creak of my apartment settling. Around 3 a.m, I dozed off briefly, only to be awakened by a child's laughter coming from somewhere inside my apartment. It was faint, but unmistakable, high-pitched and innocent, yet somehow wrong in its cheerfulness, especially at that hour. I sat up in bed, straining to hear over the rain. The laughter came again, followed by what sounded like someone whispering my name, Sarah. "Come play with us, Sarah." The voice was so close, it could have been speaking directly into my ear, yet there was no one in my room. I spent the remainder of the night with all the lights on, huddled under my blankets like a frightened child. When morning came, I called in sick to work, unable to face the thought of returning to my apartment after dark. That day, I did some research on my building's history. It was constructed in the 1940s and had undergone several renovations over the decades. Nothing particularly sinister stood out in its past. No tragic deaths or disappearances that might account for a haunting. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong with my apartment, particularly the spare room. I decided to ask my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who had lived in the building for over 30 years. When I mentioned the strange occurrences in my apartment, a shadow passed over her face. "Apartment 512?" she asked, though she knew perfectly well which unit was mine. When I nodded, she sighed. "That unit has never kept tenants for long, especially during the rainy season." She went on to tell me that while there were no official records of tragedy in my specific apartment, there had been rumors over the years. In the 1970s, a family with 2 young children had lived there. During a particularly severe April storm, both children had gone missing. They were never found, though some claimed to have heard children's laughter in the building for weeks afterward, always during rainstorms. "It's just building gossip," Mrs. Chen assured me, patting my hand. "Old buildings collect stories, like they collect dust. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but I did worry, especially when I returned to my apartment that evening, as another storm was gathering on the horizon. I considered staying at a hotel, but convinced myself I was overreacting. Strange footprints and disembodied voices could be explained away. Old pipes carrying sounds from other apartments, water leaking through the ceiling from the unit above, my own tired mind playing tricks on me. I prepared for the night methodically, checking that all windows were securely locked, inspecting the spare room closet, finding it empty and ordinary, and setting up a small camera in the hallway, aimed at the spare room door. If anything unusual happened, I would have evidence. The storm hit around midnight, rain pounding against the building with renewed fury. I lay in bed, watching the live feed from the camera on my phone. For hours, nothing happened. The spare room door remained closed, the hallway empty. My eyelids grew heavy, and I began to drift off, the sound of rain becoming a soothing white noise. I was jarred awake by a notification from the camera app. Motion detected. On my phone screen, I watched as the spare room door slowly swung open. No one was visible, yet the door opened as if pushed by an unseen hand. I held my breath, waiting. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, a small dark puddle appeared on the floor just outside the room. Water pooling, as if dripping from something or someone that I couldn't see. The puddle grew, extending into the hallway, forming what looked like the beginning of those footprints I'd seen before. I switched on my bedside lamp, my hands shaking as if in response, the power went out again, plunging the apartment into darkness, except for the glow of my phone. On the screen, I could still make out the hallway, dimly lit by the emergency lights In the building corridor outside my apartment, something moved in that minimal light. A small shadow, detaching itself from the darkness of the spare room and creeping along the wall toward my bedroom. The camera feed suddenly distorted, breaking into pixels before going black entirely. In the silence that followed, I heard it, the soft padding of wet feet approaching my bedroom door, accompanied by that same childlike giggling I'd heard the night before. My bedroom door, which I'd closed and locked before getting into bed, began to rattle, as if someone were trying the handle. The rattling became more insistent, then stopped abruptly. Water began to seep under the door, spreading across my bedroom floor in a widening pool. From this puddle, impossibly, rose what looked like the upper half of a child, a girl with long, dark hair plastered to her pale face, her eyes wide and entirely black, her mouth stretched into an unnatural smile. She emerged from what couldn't have been more than an inch of water, rising until she was half visible, reaching toward me with small hands that ended in elongated fingers, more like claws than a child's digits. "Come play with us, Sarah," she said, her voice gurgling as if she were speaking through water. "It's so lonely when it rains," I screamed, scrambling backward until I hit the headboard. The girl continued to rise from the puddle, more of her becoming visible, a soaking wet dress, legs that bent at odd angles. Behind her, a second figure began to emerge, smaller, possibly a younger child, its features harder to discern, but its laughter equally chilling. "The rain brings us back," the girl said, now fully materialized and standing in my bedroom. Water dripped constantly from her hair and clothes, forming a puddle around her that never seemed to grow smaller. "The rain lets us come inside, where it's warm, where you are." The second figure, a boy I could now see, nodded enthusiastically. "We've been watching you," he said. "You're in our room, our special place." "This is my apartment," I said, finding my voice despite my terror. "You don't belong here." The children exchanged glances, their smiles faltering momentarily. "We've always been here," the girl said. "In the walls, in the spaces in between. When it rains, we can come out and play." "What do you want?" I asked, clutching my phone like a lifeline, though I knew it would offer no protection. "Company," the boy said simply. "It's lonely in the dark, in the wet." The girl took a step toward my bed, leaving wet footprints identical to the ones I'd seen before. "You could join us," she offered, extending her hand. "When the rain falls, we're almost alive again, almost real. You could help us be real all the time." I shook my head, unable to speak. The girl's expression darkened, her smile twisting into something hungry and malevolent. "Then you shouldn't be in our room," she said, her voice no longer childlike, but rasping and ancient. "If you won't play with us, you should go." The boy nodded, his neck bending at an impossible angle. "Or we could make you like us, cold, wet, forever looking for a way back." They began to advance toward my bed in unison, water pouring from their forms and spreading across my bedroom floor. The temperature plummeted until I could see my breath clouding in front of me. The storm outside intensified, rain hammering against the windows with such force I feared the glass might shatter. I clutched the blankets around me as if they could offer some protection, my mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. The children were between me and the door, their wet footsteps leaving trails across the floor. As they approached with unnatural, jerking movements. "Please," I whispered, though I didn't know what I was pleading for. Mercy? Understanding? A wake-up call from what surely must be a dream. The girl paused, tilting her head at an angle that no living neck could achieve. "We just want to play," she said, her voice fluctuating between that of a child and something much older, much darker. "Don't you want to play with us, Sarah? Don't you want to see where we go when the rain stops?" I found myself unable to look away from her bottomless black eyes. Something stirred in their depths, not just emptiness, but a profound loneliness that resonated with something inside me. For a moment, I felt an inexplicable urge to reach out, to take her offered hand and follow wherever she might lead. A crash of thunder broke the spell, shaking the building and causing the lights to flicker momentarily. In that brief illumination, I saw the children for what they truly were. Not solid forms, but something like three-dimensional shadows. Their edges blurring and reforming, their bodies seeming to leak darkness rather than water. "You're not real," I said, finding courage in this revelation. "You're just impressions, memories. You can't hurt me." The girl's smile widened until it split her face nearly in half, revealing rows of sharp teeth like those of a deep-sea creature. "We're as real as the rain," she said, "as real as the dark, as real as your fear." She lunged forward suddenly, her hand shooting out to grab my wrist. Her touch was ice-cold and wet, but solid, terrifyingly solid. Where her fingers touched my skin, a numbing cold spread up my arm, along with a creeping darkness that seemed to seep beneath my skin. I yanked my arm away with a cry, tumbling off the opposite side of the bed and scrambling toward the ensuite bathroom. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, though I knew that conventional locks likely meant nothing to whatever these entities were. Sure enough, water immediately began seeping under the bathroom door, pooling on the tile floor. I backed away until I hit the shower stall, watching in horror as the puddle grew and those small, misshapen hands began to emerge from the water, pulling upward as if climbing out of a pool. I had nowhere left to run. The bathroom had no windows, no other exits. I was trapped with whatever these things were. These children who weren't children, who came with the rain and wanted me to join them in some dark, cold place I couldn't comprehend. As their heads began to emerge from the expanding puddle, their black eyes fixed on me, and their unnatural smiles widening in anticipation, the strangest thing happened. My alarm went off in the bedroom, its cheerful melody incongruously bright against the horror unfolding before me. The children paused, looking confused, and then alarmed as sunlight suddenly streamed through the bedroom window beyond the bathroom door. The storm had passed during the night, and dawn had broken clear and bright. "No," the girl hissed, her form already beginning to lose solidity in the growing light. "Not yet. We're not finished." The boy reached toward me one last time, his arm elongating unnaturally across the bathroom floor, fingers grasping. "Next time it rains," he promised, his voice fading along with his form. "We'll be waiting. In the closet, in the walls, in the spaces in between." Their shapes collapsed into the puddles on the floor, which themselves seemed to evaporate at an impossible rate. Within seconds, the bathroom floor was dry, with no evidence of the horrifying visitation I'd just experienced. I remained frozen in place for several minutes, afraid to move, afraid to believe they were truly gone. Eventually, the continued beeping of my alarm drove me to cautiously open the bathroom door. My bedroom was exactly as it should be. No water, no puddles, no sign that anything unnatural had occurred. I spent that day in a daze, questioning my sanity. Had I experienced some sort of waking nightmare? A hallucination brought on by stress and the power outage? I checked the camera footage from the night before, but the app showed that the connection had been lost shortly after I'd set it up. There was no record of the spare room door opening, no evidence of wet footprints or materializing children. I might have convinced myself it was all in my head if not for one detail: a small, hand-shaped bruise on my wrist where the girl had grabbed me, each finger marked in an unmistakable pattern of cold, damaged skin. I didn't return to my apartment that night or the next. I stayed with a friend, making excuses about plumbing issues in my building. I couldn't bring myself to explain the truth, that my apartment was somehow inhabited by entities that manifested during rainstorms, entities that took the form of children, but were clearly something else entirely. But I couldn't stay away forever. After a week, I reluctantly returned, having nearly convinced myself that I'd experienced some sort of breakdown. The weather forecast showed clear skies for the foreseeable future. Seattle's rainy season was finally transitioning to its brief summer. I would have time to gather my essential belongings and find a new place to live, somewhere far from that spare room and its impossible closet. As I packed my things, I avoided the spare room entirely. Whatever had happened, real or imagined, had centered around that space, and I wanted nothing to do with it. But as I was gathering items from my bedroom, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My weather app notification showing a sudden change in forecast. An unexpected storm system was moving in, due to hit that very evening. I should have left immediately. I should have abandoned everything and just gone. But I'd nearly finished packing, and I told myself I could be out within the hour, long before the rain began. I rushed through the rest of my belongings, haphazardly throwing clothes and personal items into suitcases. I was zipping up the last bag when I heard it, the soft patter of raindrops against my windows. The storm had arrived early. My hands froze on the suitcase. From the spare room came the now familiar creak of the closet door opening. Then footsteps, those soft, wet padding sounds moving down the hallway toward my bedroom. "No," I whispered, backing away from the door. "No, this isn't happening." "Sarah," the voice came from just outside my bedroom, sweet and childlike, yet underpinned with that ancient wrongness. The rain came back early. Just for us. Just for you. My bedroom door swung open slowly, revealing the two children standing in the hallway, water pooling around their feet and dripping from their shadowy forms. The girl held out her hand, her black eyes fixed on me with hungry intent. "It's time to play, Sarah," she said. "Time to join us in the spaces in between." I backed away until I hit the wall, desperately looking for an escape route. The window was my only option, a 5-story drop to the street below, but perhaps better than whatever these entities had planned for me. As if reading my thoughts, the boy shook his head. "There's no escape," he said, his voice bubbling as if speaking through water. "The rain has come for you. We have come for you." They advanced into the room, moving with that same unnatural gait. Not quite walking, more like floating, while maintaining the pretense of steps. Water spread across my bedroom floor, rising impossibly fast, soon ankle-deep and climbing higher. "What, are you?" I gasped, now standing on my bed to escape the rising water. The girl tilted her head at that impossible angle again. "We are what the rain remembers," she said cryptically. "We are what waits in the dark behind the world." "Let me go," I pleaded. "I'll leave the apartment. You can have it. It's not the apartment we want," the boy said, his smile widening to match his sister's. "It's you, your warmth, your life." The water had reached the top of my mattress now, soaking through the blankets and lapping at my feet. It was ice cold and oddly thick, more like oil than water, and where it touched my skin, I felt that same numbing darkness I'd experienced when the girl grabbed my wrist. They were within arm's reach now, their small hands extended toward me. The room had grown so cold that ice crystals were forming on the walls, on the furniture, on my skin. "Please," I whispered one last time, though I knew there would be no mercy from these things that wore children's faces. The girl reached out and touched my cheek, her fingers leaving trails of numbing cold. "Don't be afraid," she said, almost tenderly. "The rain is beautiful from the other side, and you'll never be alone again." The boy took my hand, his touch sending that same deadening cold up my arm. "We've waited so long for someone like you," he said. "Someone who sees us, someone who hears us in the rain." I felt myself sinking, though whether into the strange dark water that now filled my bedroom or into some state beyond consciousness, I couldn't tell. The children held onto me, their grips tightening as the water rose over my knees, my waist, my chest. "The rain remembers," the girl whispered as the water reached my chin. "And now, so will you." As the dark water closed over my head, I heard one last thing, not the children's voices, but a deeper, older voice, speaking from what seemed like the center of the storm itself. "Welcome to the spaces in between, Sarah. Welcome to the endless rain." I don't know how long I was under. Time seemed to lose all meaning in that dark, cold place. I remember fragments, moving through walls as if they were no more substantial than mist, looking out at the rain-soaked world from behind the glass of windows that no longer kept me out, hearing the heartbeats of the living as they passed unknowingly by. And then, impossibly, I was gasping awake on my bedroom floor. The water was gone. The children were gone. Weak morning sunlight filtered through my window blinds. The storm had passed. I lay there for what felt like hours, afraid to move, afraid that any action might pull me back into that nightmare realm I'd glimpsed. When I finally found the courage to stand, I discovered my apartment completely dry, with no sign of flooding or water damage. Even my packed suitcases were untouched, ready for my planned escape. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? I might have believed that if not for two things, the hand-shaped bruise on my wrist had spread, the cold, damaged skin now extending halfway up my forearm in a pattern of branching frost-like markings. And when I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror, my eyes had changed. still my natural color, but with something dark moving in their depths, something that didn't belong there. I left that day and never returned to the apartment. I moved to Arizona, where rain is a rare occurrence, and storms are brief when they do come. I've tried to put that experience behind me, to convince myself it was some sort of breakdown or fugue state. But every time it rains, even the lightest drizzle, I feel them stirring somewhere inside me, or perhaps around me, in those spaces in between that they mentioned. I hear their whispers, their giggles. I feel their cold, wet hands reaching for me from the corners of my vision. And sometimes, when the rain is especially heavy, I find myself standing at windows or doors, looking out at the falling water with a longing I can't explain and don't want to acknowledge, as if some part of me wants to step out into that rain and disappear into whatever lies beyond, whatever dark, cold place exists in the spaces between raindrops, between moments, between worlds. The weather report is calling for an unseasonable storm tonight, the first significant rainfall since I moved here. Already I can feel them awakening, stirring in the darkness behind my eyes, whispering promises of reunion. They've been patient, waiting for this moment, this rain. I've locked all the doors and windows. I've sealed every drain, but I know it won't matter. They don't need doors or pipes or physical passages. They come with the rain itself, emerging from every drop, every splash. As I write this, I can hear the first raindrops beginning to fall on my roof, and somewhere in my apartment, in the walls, in the dark corners, in the spaces in between, I hear them laughing, waiting, watching. They're coming for me again. And this time, I'm afraid there will be no morning to wake up to. This time I fear I'll become like them, a shadow that moves with the rain, forever seeking warmth, forever lost in the cold spaces between worlds. If you're reading this, beware of rainy nights. Beware of apartments with spare rooms that no one uses. Beware of closets that seem darker inside than they should be. But most of all, beware of the sound of children laughing when you're alone, especially when the rain is falling, because once they find you, once they mark you as their own, nowhere is truly dry. Nowhere is truly safe. They will always find their way back to you when the rain comes. And the rain, as they say, always returns, always remembers, always finds its way home. I think I hear them now. Soft footsteps padding down my hallway, small hands tapping at my office door. The rain is falling harder, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. They're calling my name. They're telling me it's time to join them properly, to become one with the endless rain. And the most terrifying part, I think I want to go. I want to go.